Hello, my name is Chrissy and this is the Stitched Together podcast. The date is 30th of September 2014 and this is episode 4 of the video podcast. You can find show notes on the website www.stitchtogether.co.uk, and if you select the podcast button at the top of the page, that'll take you to all the embedded episodes, including the audio episodes, and also it will give you full show notes. You can also subscribe to the podcast on there using the RSS subscription buttons. There's also links to subscribing through iTunes and through YouTube. So hopefully that gives you lots of options to subscribe to the podcast if you enjoy it, which I hope you do. I think I'm going to change things up a bit. If you listen to the audio podcast, you're aware possibly of the sort of general layout of my podcast. It had section headings and they're in a particular order each time I recorded. I've had a think about it and I think I'm going to shuffle things up slightly, add another category and sort of merge others. I hope it works okay, but we'll see how it goes. First category is a new one, and that's basically stuff and things. All the stuff that doesn't really fit into the other categories. It used to be sort of called plotting, and it was at the beginning, and it talked about, you know, knit-alongs and how I was getting on with those and ideas I was having and giveaways, and basically it was a bit of a hodgepodge. But I don't want to talk about things I'm thinking about doing in this section anymore. I'm going to put that sort of closer to the end. So this category is going to be about things like drawing for giveaways, talking about any kind of news that's going on, just general chit chat basically. In this episode, there's really only a couple of things I needed to tell you. Firstly, the Stitch Together Where I Live Craft Along, all the prize winners have got in touch with me now, and most of the prizes have gone out, and the last one is all packaged up and ready to take to the post office. So that's all taken care of. Thank you for getting in touch. And I think in future giveaways will be done. I'll announce the winners on the podcast, and if within a week or two I've not heard from people, I'll put an ear burn out on the Ravelry boards, because I understand, especially with it being a video podcast now, people are less likely to keep up with announcements and things because it takes time to sit down and watch an episode. So I completely understand that you might not be keeping up with current episodes, and I don't want you to miss out on winning your prizes, getting your prizes to you. The giveaways that are currently going on at the moment, sorry, I keep looking down at my notes. Shall I put my notes in my lap? It's slightly easier to look at that way. I won't do this anymore. The current giveaways are the Wool Barn stitch markers and Louise Tilbrook's Autumn Crocus shawl pattern. The giveaway threads are still open on the Ravelry group. You can only enter each contest once, and you must be a member of the group to win a prize. If you are not a member of the group and I draw you, I will draw again. There is no point in not entering the group, joining the group, because it doesn't get you bombarded with emails. It doesn't cost you anything, so there's no point in not joining in. But I just want to maybe get people encouraged to come and join in the conversations that are going on over there, because it's good fun and I like chatting with everybody in a group. The giveaways will close, let's say, at the end of this week. I'll close them and then I will draw in the next episode, because the schedule's been messed up a bit because I was having technical issues last week with the recording. Then I was away at the weekend and I've had to recover from the weekend away, and yesterday I was completely messed up. I took some Oromorph, which is oral morphine, to get me back home from Dorset, and it was like 4.5 hours in the car. And whenever I take Oromorph, I'm a space cadet for about 36 hours afterwards. It's ridiculous. I'm floating. I have no concept of time passing. What I've been doing, nothing. It's not pleasant at all. I don't like it. I feel really disconnected. So that's kind of taken chunks out of my time as well. So, and this is a second recording, which I hope is going to work because I've got new software now. So that's what I'm going to do in this instance. But I think in future I'll leave giveaways open for. I'll talk about the giveaway in one episode, and then 2 episodes later I'll do the drawing. But this has been a bit messed up. I suppose it will be 2 episodes later I'll do the drawing. It's just it's been extended a little bit. So that's what I'm going to talk about in Stuff and Things. Moving on to Done and Dusted. See, I'm still a bit scatty because of the morphine. I'm having to look at all my notes because I can't remember what categories are coming next. And I should know by now. I've been doing this for well over a year. Even if I normally just do it orally, it's still confusing doing it visually as well. Anyway, the next section is Done and Dusted. You might have noticed I've been a bit of a quick change artist. I'm making the most of doing these in small sections, so I had a little quick change in the interval. This is my Vedbeck shawl by Karina Westerman, and I love it. This project, which I've talked about before in previous episodes, is a shawl that I kind of had in mind as soon as I saw the pattern released, because I read Karina's blog and have done for several years. Her blog is fourth-edition.co.uk, and she writes really interesting blog posts, and she's a really talented designer as well. So it was in my favourites, and I mentally thought I will make that at some point. And then over on the Fibre podcast, they were talking about knitting this shawl, and it sort of turned into a kind of informal knit along to knit this Vedbeck shawl. And I thought, you know what, I'll get on with it, and it gave me a bit of a kick up the backside. So I decided I was going to look through Stash and see if I had anything suitable, and I was really surprised to find that I could actually use this Jameson's Spindrift, which is a Shetland yarn, and I got it in 2011 as a gift from my sister-in-law and my brother. It was yarn I chose myself, but my sister-in-law was with me at the time and said, would you like that for Christmas? And I went, yes please. So the yarn I got, I intended to do a kind of graduated tank top or something in Farewell perhaps, and just add a neutral contrast colour and sort of change the colours slowly up the length of the tunic or the vest. And it just sat there waiting to find the right pattern for it, and I never did. And this pattern just seemed to fit really well, and decided I was going to graduate it. So what I did was, I'll take this off now because it's still quite warm, as you can see by the short sleeves. The shawl is really quite simple and kind of addictive to do. It starts at the top, up here, and it is triangular in shape, and the only complicated bit for the first part of the shawl really is adding in extra sections as you come to them. So you've got extra things of slip stitches, and the slip stitches kind of keep it a little bit interesting as you're going. And what I did was, as I went up the length of the shawl, when I changed colour, I did 3 rows of the first colour and 3 rows of the other colour, but alternating, in order to transition a little bit more streamlined, smoother than just having a hard straight edge between each colour change. The second change is a little bit more subtle because the difference in colours is not as strong as with the first two, and with the bottom one you can barely see it. In fact, you can see it better on that camera than you can in real life. I actually only used one skein of the darker colour at the bottom. Basically, I got my maths wrong. I used my scale to weigh the rows, like how much yarn was taken in each row, and sort of calculated it based on what had left in the skein. And I started the bottom section where the little arrows are. See if you can, that's better, you can see the arrows a bit clearer. And I didn't do my maths right, basically. Never mind. The shawl was blocked using blocking wires along the top, and the bottom was just pinned out individually at the bottom of the arrows. So it's a very, very subtle little scallop on the bottom edge, which I kind of like. I think if I'd put wires in, I probably would have pulled it a lot harder, and I think that the points would have been more obvious, but I think it would have been it would have changed the appearance of it, I think. Anyway, the shawl is huge, as you can see, and it wraps around you beautifully. It's a gorgeous, gorgeous shawl, and I've been wearing it quite a lot. It's a nice weight because it's 4-ply, and the 4-ply, UK 4-ply, US fingering weight. You know that. I don't need to translate for you. Don't need to do that, do I? Tell me if I need to do that, because I'm sure you know. Anyway, the yarn that I used is 4-ply or fingering weight, and each skein is only 25 grams because it's Jameson's mainly traditionally used for fair isle work, and when you're doing colour work you don't want huge skeins to work with or huge balls to work with, because a lot of it would be wasted that way. So you want smaller skeins, so you just use one skein for like one small band around the garment. So that's why they come in 25 grams. And there are so many different colours in Jameson's, and also Jameson & Smith's, who are the other Shetland brokers, and they specialise in Shetland grown yarn spun up into Shetland woolen spun yarn. And the colours and the colour ranges are extraordinary with both those brokers. They're, if you go and look at the website, there's a link in the show notes. The array of colours is phenomenal. It's quite hard to choose online which colours go together. I actually chose these in person because it was at a show. I think if you are ever going to do a colour work sweater or something, it could be worth your while getting a colour chart, because there's such subtle differences in the colours. As you can tell from these bottom ones, there's really very, very subtle blowing the colour out there. I do apologise. My cat just came in. I think she wants feeding. Why do I record when I know she's going to come in and interrupt us? I do apologise. I'm just going to pause us right there. Her hunger is now being sated. So essentially, the Vedbeck shawl, really, really like it. It's great fun to knit, and it's a wonderful, wonderful warm garment to wear. It's light, it's warm, it's woolen spun, so it traps a lot of air, and it's garter stitch, which also increases that sort of amount of air that it can trap in the ridges of the garter stitch. So it's very, very snug, and it's cozy, and as you wear it, it becomes softer and softer and softer. It may feel slightly scratchy when you start to knit with Shetland yarn, especially if you are doing it after knitting with merino. It's a very, very different substance. it's very different, and it may feel slightly scratchy to touch as you work with it, but every time you wash it, every time you work with it, every time you wear it, it gets softer and softer and softer. But it's really pill resistant. It's really strong, sturdy yarn that is hard wearing and will still look good in 50 years time. It's beautiful stuff, and it's well worth investing the time and effort into knitting with it. It may not feel as luxurious as doing merino silk, but you won't have to be depilling it every 5 minutes the way you would be if you were knitting with merino silk. So it's worthwhile knitting with it. It's an investment. That is the Vedbeck shawl. The other one that I finished, which I packed away for some bizarre reason, is the yarn I used for the Ricky hat. The Ricky hat was knit out of a merino alpaca silk, Pochion. It's called Francesca DK. And I showed you that in episode 1, and I was very conflicted about how stretchy it was going to be, how slouchy it was going to be. And after sort of debating about it, I decided to rip it out. And instead, I knit it, because the yarn is lovely and I enjoyed knitting with it. I really wanted to knit with it straight away and get it into a project. I decided to knit the honey cowl. And there you go. It's got an interesting slip stitch pattern. You can see where the rows change. You get like a little line through it. But it's a very, very simple slip stitch pattern, and it really shows off the subtleties of a semi-solid yarn. It's kind of hard to show it on the camera because it is so subtle. The colour doesn't really, it's hard to show, but it's beautiful and soft, and the draping is actually a plus instead of a minus in this, because it just hangs really softly and beautifully. I really like the wrong side of this as well. I think it's a really interesting texture, it's an interesting effect, and I think it doesn't matter how it hangs because I think it shows off nicely both sides of the working of the fabric. I think it goes nicely. The yarn is teeny bit scratchy against my neck, but I think the more I wear it, the more the ends of the alpaca will soften. So I shall just have to wear it until it softens. I mean, it's not horrid. It's not. Somebody might have problems with it. I don't have problems with it, but I've got fairly robust skin, and I really like it. I think it's nice. I'll try and double it up. Take my glasses off first. I'm going to throttle myself with this. I know I am. It's slightly too short. I should have made it cast on a few more stitches. Throttled. I have to stretch it out. There we go. Which will be kind of nice with maybe with a funnel neck coat, sort of, that had space at the top of the collar to keep it all snug. No wind whistling down there. I've actually got a V-neck winter coat, so I shall wear it singly and possibly just wear it like that. Oh, I can see you again. You're all in focus. So yeah, I'll probably just wear it like that in my winter coat in the neck, just keep it nice and warm, because that's the thing about alpaca. It is very light but very, very warm, and adding it to merino silk really increases the amount of heat it traps. In fact, it's a little uncomfortably warm. But I just wanted to show what I decided to do with that yarn, and to confirm that I think it was the right decision. I think this yarn was wrong for the Ricky hat. I think it's better suited to something drapey and something where it won't matter if it stretches, whereas with the Ricky hat, if it had stretched, it would have really shown that it had stretched. So really enjoyed knitting it. It's the second time I've knit this pattern, and I knit the last one out of a sport weight yarn, and this is a DK, though it is a light DK. I think the pattern is written for a DK weight, but you can really just use the stitch pattern with any variation of yarn and stitch counts and needle sizes to basically adjust to taste. And it's a really good free pattern, and the link's on the show notes, you can go and have a look. It's a really nice stitch pattern, and I think it works really well on the cowl. Just a quick note about the edges, because it's knit in the round from the bottom up, it's that way. You start with 5 rows of stocking stitch, then you do this stitch pattern, and then you finish with another 5 rows of stocking stitch before you cast off. What I do when I do this pattern is I do the 5 rows of stocking stitch, and then I weigh to tell myself how much yarn that section took. Then I make a note of it, and then I knit until I've nearly reached that amount of weight of yarn left, and then I do this edging bit, and that means I use up nearly every scrap of yarn, and it's worth doing. Just taking the time to stick your yarn on the scales to work out exactly how much you've used, and that way you get as much as possible out of your yarn. That is everything that's done and dusted. So next we come to nose to the grindstone. The stuff that I'm currently working on is a bit short, shall we say. The list is a little short because the Vedbeck shawl has been totally taking up all of my time. I've been a bit obsessed with it, and now that that's done, I've been moving on to a couple of other things. The first thing is a baby blanket, and it is currently in, that's the upside downy bit, I'll show you the bottom, there we go. It's a bag from the Little Mount Yarn Company, and I got a discount code from another podcast, and I went over to the shop, and they've got some really nice yarn and stuff, but I saw this fabric, which is something I sort of fell in love with just as I was stopping doing so much sewing, and I didn't end up buying the fabric because I thought I've still got loads in my stash and I really need to use that, and I'm not doing much sewing, so I never bought it. So to see the fabric in a project bag form, I kind of had to get it. So it's really cute, I love it. It's kind of quirky and Halloweeny, and I don't know, on the inside it's all these really cute sort of polka dots. I really like it. It's a really good, it's a box bag, but it's much softer than the one I've got, the other box bag I've got, which is much more sort of crisp and robust. This is much squishier, which works better for me. It means I can sort of cram it down a bit more into storage spaces. Anyway, that's the Little Mount Yarn Company, and it's worth having a look at on Etsy. I'll put a link in the show notes. The project in this bag is a baby blanket, and it is called the Walt Painted Chevron Baby Blanket by Danielle Romanetti, and it's all wrapped around itself. It's basically just a chevron baby blanket, but the difference is these textured bits in garter stitch are in a different colour, and the background, the white or the main colour, is done in stocking stitch, so the coloured chevrons pop out, makes it a bit more interesting. And I decided to use up this lime green Cascade 220 superwash that I had already in my stash, and add in the white yarn which I bought to go with it, because I wanted something that would be gender neutral, because when I started it I didn't know the gender of the baby, and to be honest I'm not a great one for pink or blue or pastels or whatever, and to be honest, neither are the parents of the baby. So I chose lime green, which is a nice bright zingy colour, which is totally gender neutral as far as I'm concerned. And I made the blanket wider than is suggested in the pattern because I want it to be a bit more square, because the actual pattern is quite long and thin, and I wanted it to be usable as a play mat. But also I just think squarer blankets are probably usable longer term. They can sort of snuggle up underneath it as they get a bit bigger. So yeah, it's probably, I think it's an extra 4 repeats of the chevron I've added to the blanket. And what I decided to do, see all these stitch markers? I made those. They mark on the right side where you do the decreases, and the little metal ones at the top, those are coilless stitch markers, and I think I got them from Tangled Yarn, and they are higher coilless safety pins or stitch markers, and I think they're really good. They're really light, they don't get in the way, they don't leave any spaces between the stitches, and they're easy to move around. So they're just really handy to have in your project bags to just grab and use. And you can use them for crochet as well, because they're lockable stitch markers, which means they are also unlockable, which means you can move them around, which obviously if you've got these kind of stitch markers, they don't work with crochet. So what I decided to do, the original pattern has you use 3 contrast colours, but I decided I just wanted to use the 1 contrast colour because I already had this in stash. And it had 3 coloured repeats of these sort of green chevrons. Then you have a big section in the middle where it's just the main colour, and then it's got 2 of these 3 chevron sections in 2 different colours. And it just looked a little lopsided to me, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to do 5 of these coloured bands at either end with a big chunk of white in the middle, simply because I've got the green and I just think it looks more balanced. So that's my plan, and it's quite easy to knit, but I put the stitch markers in so I didn't have to look at it to remember. Like the difference in the stitch markers means that when I'm on the wrong side, I just feel for these little ones, and when I'm on the right side, I feel for these big ones, because it's otherwise you end up sort of counting between each chevron, and if I'm reading or something, I don't want to be counting all the time. So just having the stitch markers just makes it a little bit more brainless. Means I can do it in company as well. So that's why I did it. I used Cascade 220 Superwash as it's kind of my go-to yarn for baby and children knitting. I think it's a really good, strong, sturdy, robust yarn, which is nice and soft and can be slung in the washing machine, which I think is pretty much an essential for all parents of young children. So I had quite a bit in stash anyway, but I didn't have the white because I don't normally go for white in baby projects. I shouldn't have done it really, it's a bit unfair to the parent. I just really like the green and the white together, but it's machine washable, it'll be fine. They'd have to machine wash it anyway, even if it was in grey, it would still need washing. Baby fluids got on it. Anyway, that is what's been taking up most of my time since I finished the Vedbeck. The other thing is from the Whip Crack Away project. I actually finished off one old whip from last year, and that is currently blocking, which hopefully I'll be able to show you in the next episode. I won't talk about it now because I can't show you it because it's wet. The other one is this one, which I showed you in the last episode, and I've added these 2, well, it's really 5 blocks to the Modern Quilt wrap. So this is a project that I'm not sitting and doing masses of in one go. I'm just sort of picking a bit up every now and again and just adding a bit more to it. I might not get it finished by the end of the knit along, but it'll certainly get me pushed a bit further onwards. It'll get me back into the habit of working on it, and it's fun. I really like working with Kid Silk Haze, especially in these lovely bright colours, and it's just fun to do a bit every now and again. It's nice to have something that's modular that you can just pick up and put down rather than just having to go forever. You sort of feel a sense of achievement with every one that you finish off. It's like, I finished a square. It was 2 inches across, but I finished a square. You know, it sort of gives you a sense of achievement, which you don't get when you're doing like a massive shawl until you reach the end of it. So it's kind of fun to do it. I'm enjoying it quite a lot. So that's the Whip Crack Away knit along that I've been working on, and I'll put a link in the show notes so you can go and have a look at the thread that tells you about it. It's with Tales from the Plain and Knit British, I think. Yes, Knit British and Tales from the Plain. And the idea is to motivate us to get on with some of our older whips, and it's really working with me. It's sort of making me pull out some older stuff and have a look at them. For instance, this project that's currently blocking, it's something that sat around for ages, and I finished it in a day. It just needed me to finish it. Just get on and do it. And sometimes you just need a bit of a prod to finish projects when there's bright and shiny things that you want to knit. It's like someone needs to go, you forgot to finish your whip. You know, it's a good idea to do it every now and again. And I think that is it for Nose to the Grindstone. So the next section is plotting. In the section in this episode about plotting, there's a couple of things I wanted to talk about. The first being kind of the most standard kind of plotting. I know what I'm going to make and I've got the yarn for it. It was kind of a request from my sister-in-law. On Facebook, she posted a photo of my niece wearing a hat, and a mutual friend queried why my niece was wearing a hat that had not been made by me, and I pointed out that in actual fact she'd outgrown the hats I'd made for her last year. So I of course offered to knit more hats this winter for my niece and my nephew, because I can't not have them in handmade hats, can I? Especially if they want to have them. So on making this offer, my sister-in-law very shamefacedly admitted that the only way I would get a hand knit hat onto my niece's head is if it was in pink. Don't like pink. My sister-in-law doesn't really like pink either, but she says it's kind of, she's at that stage where peer pressure has instigated the love of pink, along with the love of Disney. I really feel sorry for my sister-in-law sometimes, because she's like me in the fact that she's not a girly girl. Yes, she likes high heels and dressing up and wearing a bit of slap every now and again, but not every day. and my niece is turning into a bit of a girly girl, a bit of a princess. Kind of got to go with it really, if I wanted to wear hand knitted things. So this yarn is Milla Mia, and I got a contrast yarn to go with it. It's a bit more raspberry than that. It's a lot less pink than that. It's yeah, it's more of a raspberry sorbet colour, and this is a more sort of shell pink than blown out white. I wonder if that will make a difference. Yeah, it's that colour. And no, that's still not the right colour. About that. Anyway, I bought this yarn because I wanted to use it for quite a while. It's Superwash Merino. It's a sport weight, and it's 50 grams of skein, and it's a really, really soft merino yarn, and it's, like I say, it's a superwash, which makes it useful for kids' clothing. And there's a good range of really nice bright colours, and I have squished it in shops, but I never actually bought any to make something. And I thought, when I was looking for a pink that I could tolerate, I thought about this particular range and went and had a look and thought, actually this is a really nice kind of delicate pale pink, which I find easier to tolerate than bubblegum candy pink. It's a prettier pink, and together with the raspberry I think will look quite good, especially in the pattern that I've got in mind for this particular hat, which is the Worm Hat by Katharina Knopp. And I'll show you a picture of it, providing my tablet opens it quickly enough. There was actually one particular photo on the pattern page which really, really attracted me to this pattern in the first place. It's that one. And I really like the idea of having a contrast colour in the sort of stocking stitch bit, and the main colour, the garter stitch, being a bit lighter and brighter. So I actually intended to make it for myself, but when I found this yarn, which is in a sport weight, and this pattern is written for a sport weight, I thought actually this would work quite well for my niece. She looks quite nice in little slouchy hats, really suits her face, and I thought, oh, it'll be great. Bought the yarn, and then realised it doesn't go down to toddler. So I have looked up a sizing chart on Woolly Wormhead's website, and Woolly Wormhead, if you've not heard of her, is a hat designer of great renown in the UK. She does amazing hats, and her hats normally go all the way down from sort of baby all the way up to extra large men's hats. And she did some research a few years ago, before I started podcasting, where she asked people to measure all the heads they had access to and sent her the details with the age and gender of their head measurements. And she took all that information and collated it into an average head size chart, and it's really useful. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this hat pattern, the worm hat pattern, and do a gauge swatch, and then use the measurements that are given in this chart for averages and kind of rejig a few numbers, because I think it'll be fairly straightforward to work out what the numbers should be. I mean, I've designed hats, it's not hard, especially when it's that straightforward. It's just the ridges and then the decreases to worry about after you've done the brim, so it won't be difficult. So that's kind of next up on my list of projects I'm going to do, because I don't want my niece's head to go cold. And obviously once I've done that, then I need to do one for her little brother, but I don't know what I'm going to do. I'm going to find him something kind of cute, because he's just turned 1 and he's quite a little character, so I need to find the right kind of hat pattern for him. So that's the first thing that I've been plotting. The second thing is kind of carried on from the tradition that I started on my blog about a year ago, 18 months ago, which was a challenge to myself to use up some of my older stash. The idea being, I went into a box of yarn, put my hand in without looking, rummaged around a bit and pulled out some stash, and just basically had to knit something with it. And it worked really well until it kind of ground to a halt. And I decided to kind of kickstart it again after several months of not doing it. So I dug out some yarn. This is back to front. I'll correct it in post-production. It's mohair wool from Kelhelland, and it's spun by the Natural Fibre company, which is in Cornwall. They do a lot of small scale spinning jobs for rare breeds sheep farmers, and this yarn is from a Cornish sheep farm, rare breeds, and it's a blend of Dorset, Ryland and Castle Moret, and it's a double knit, and it's kind of a little bit softer and smoother than the Shetland, but it's still got quite a lot of body to it. And each skein is 100 grams and there's 120 metres in each, and I've got 2 of them, and that's a pretty accurate colour that you can see. It's this really nice creamy colour, and I think I could get a shawl out of this. I originally thought I was going to do a French can-can with it, but then I got some yarn from Lioness Arts to do that, and I think it'll work better. But I'm thinking of maybe copying the idea of the French can-can and sort of doing a garter stitch body and then a knitted on edging, but actually make up the edging myself. And I mean, I've got loads of stitch dictionaries that I can look things up with to use, and I'm currently working through a craftsy class which is with Franklin Habit, and it's I think it's the heirloom, bear with me 1 second, it's called Heirloom Lace Edgings, and I'm working my way through it. I think I'm on chapter 3. It's a really good class. There's a lot of history and stuff in there, which I always find interesting. I find the sort of the social history in particular, that aspect of knitting, I find absolutely fascinating. So, and he's got a lot of interest in that, so he talks about it a lot. And I think by doing this class, working my way through it, I'll be able to maybe come up with some ideas of what would really work nicely as an edging on a double knit woolly shawl. So that's my plan with that, but that's more of a long-term plan, shall we say. And if you're interested in the craftsy class, I've put a link on the show notes, and just a reminder, if you click on a craftsy link or an Amazon link in my show notes, and you then go on and buy either the recommended book or the recommended class, I do get a little commission on it, and that little commission will go towards supporting the podcast, things like postage and stuff like that. But I just thought I'd give you a heads up. There is a information on the web page which will tell you about it all, but I just thought I'd give you a heads up because I don't think I've ever mentioned it in the video podcast. So like I say, it doesn't cost you anything, and it will help support the podcast if you're interested. And that is it for blotting. Next up, we have everyone's favourite, Splashed Out. A little while ago, I heard about the upcoming closure of Juno Fibre Arts, which is a wonderful UK indie dyer, and it's for personal reasons, and she's perfectly entitled to stop doing what she does, and I just thought I would get in a last bit of stash from her, and because I only recently started buying from Juno Fibre Arts, which I'm quite sad about because I actually didn't get much opportunity to get stuff from her. And the skein of yarn I got was in a nice neutral colour, because I'm trying to sort of up my neutral quota of yarns, because I've got lots and lots of bright colours and not very many sort of soft neutrals that will go with lots of things. So the yarn I got was Millie Singles, and it's in this beautiful silver grey. It's a little paler than that. It's always so hard to judge. It's a little, yeah, it's like that. It's a singles in a fingering weight 4-ply, and it's a really, really soft merino, because it's so sort of underspun, because it's just a soft singles. It's got almost like a little halo to it, and I think it's going to pill as soon as you look at it, but it'll feel amazing against my neck. And when I got it, I was looking at it and I suddenly thought, because what I originally thought was I'd just make a small shawlette out of the silver, and I then thought, well, maybe it would work nice as a contrast in a 2-colour shawl. And then I remembered this skein of yarn, which is exactly the same yarn but in the peacock colourway. Doesn't it go nicely together? Don't you think that would make a lovely shawl? I think maybe something like cameo might work really well with that. I'm very sad that Asti is calling it quits on the business, but I'm so glad that she produced so much beautiful yarn and fibre for us all to use, and I think this is going to be a wonderful, wonderful addition to my accessories wardrobe, and I wish her all the best in the future. I think she closes at the end of September. I may be wrong on that, but I'll put a link to the website just in case there's still a few bits and pieces that are available. Yeah, sad to see a UK indie dyer go, because you know she's been part of the backdrop of the British knitting scene for a few years, and I'm sad I didn't find her sooner. Next up is a dyer that is new to me. It's somebody I took a bit of a gamble on, because I found her on Etsy, and it wasn't a recommendation through anybody. I just saw her great colour sense, and there was a really good range of colours and bases, and I thought I'll just favourite the shop, and I just kept coming back to it time and time again, and I thought, you know what, I'm going to take a punt on that, because they just look amazing colours. And the dyer in question is something I struggle to pronounce. It's Linitium X Machina, and that's how it's pronounced. Oops, that's how it's written, I should say. That's not how it's pronounced. And this is a Finnish dyer, and because Finland is a member of the Economic Union, the European Economic Union, I don't have to pay customs charges on it. I have to pay sales tax, but I don't have to pay customs charges on it, and it just means I don't have to pay the customs charges that add on quite a lot when I buy from the States or Australia or somewhere like that that's outside the EU. And it's not the tax that adds on, it's the admin charges that adds on to the price. So getting stuff from within the EU actually is a lot more reasonable cost for us. Anyway, this yarn, the colourway is called Urban Sprawl, and I think it's a really good neutral colour with these kind of really dark steely grey and bronze highlights to it. I think it's a really, really interesting yarn. And this is basic sock yarn. It's 75% superwash wool and 25% nylon. Not sure if that superwash wool is merino or not. It's certainly feels very robust if it's merino. It's very tightly spun, and pretty sure it's a 2-ply. Oh no, it's not a 2-ply. It might be a 4-ply. It's hard to tell sometimes. It's 420 metres or 460 yards, and it's 100 grams or 3.5 ounces. And I actually got it thinking I'll make it into a Shawl X. I thought it was a really good neutral colour. But having got it, I think it would make really interesting socks. And I think it's sort of muted enough that a lace or cable pattern wouldn't get lost in it. So I might try something a bit more interesting in my next pair of socks using this yarn. Because it's not self-striping, I think doing something a bit more interesting with the fabric could be good fun. So that's Linitium X Machina, and I do recommend you go and have a look at the shop on Etsy, because there's some really nice colourways on there, really interesting different colourways. I think it'll be worth looking at, especially if you're in Europe. It's the sort of colourway and dyeing that I have seen mainly in the US. It's very much like that, the US indie dyer colour sense. So it's nice to be able to get something like that in the EU. The last skein of yarn I'm going to show you is from one of my favourites, and if you've ever watched any of my podcasts or listened to any of my podcasts or ever read my blog, you know that this is pretty much one of my favourites, and it's Pochion. And try as hard as I might to ignore the updates on a Sunday evening, if I happen to see a picture on Facebook, I'm usually suckered into going and having a look. And that's exactly what happened this time. It was the lace update, and I thought, I don't need any lace. I've got quite a lot of lace yarn. Don't need any. And then I saw this. It's Robin lace. It is 100% A-grade mulberry silk. And oh, it's just stunning. It really is beautiful. I love their colourway names. We'll tune our voices to the lute. She has great colourway names, and it's so soft and silky, which is obvious because it is silk yarn. It's a 2-ply, and it's got a bit of a halo to it. It'll make the most amazing shawl. It really will. It's beautiful, and these autumnal colours will just it'll be something very, very special indeed, and I just couldn't resist. I mean, their prices are excellent. That was £18 including VAT for that skein, and it's 800 metres, 875 yards, and that's silk, and it's hand dyed, and there's probably somewhere between 5 and 8 skeins in a lot, and it's a one-off unique colourway. You won't ever see it again, and that's my problem with Posh yarns, because they don't repeat their colourways. If I don't grab something I fall in love with, then I might not get a chance to get something like it again. Though sometimes there are sort of colourways, sort of colour choices that kind of come up again because Tony, the dyer, they appeal to him obviously aesthetically. They'll crop up again, but they might be in a different base, they might be slightly different, they might be more tonal, or they might be, you know, with other colours I'm not necessarily as keen on. So when I see something I absolutely fall in love with, I end up buying it because I just know I'm unlikely to see anything like it again. And this, fell in love with it completely and utterly. I just think it's beautiful, really, really beautiful. So yeah, that's Robin lace from Posh Yarn. I have no idea what I'm going to make with that. I'm probably just going to sit here and stroke it and pet it and call it by its first name, which is Wheel. Yeah, really beautiful. Highly recommend Posh Yarn, though I am warning you, you will want to spend money. Though it's very reasonable, very reasonable. I certainly think for independent dyeing it's very reasonable. So that's my recommendation. Go and have a look at the show notes, click through and go and have a look at Pochion, because they're really quite special dyers, I think. online community, this episode is going to be quite brief, I think. I just wanted to say that now I'm sticking with the video format, it would be really, really helpful if you're enjoying this format and you want to say that you're enjoying it. If you could go and have a look at iTunes and leave a review, I'd be incredibly grateful, because obviously all the reviews were left when I was an audio podcast. And an audio podcast is very different from a video podcast. And it would be really nice to let other people know whether it's worth checking me out or not. So thank you if you take the time to do that. Also, it'd be great if you took the time and did it for your other favourite podcasters, because the only way for other people to find a new podcast is if there are reviews, and if people favourite something, give it a star rating, then it'll pop up in a search. So if you like a podcast and you want other people to share in it and join in that community, then giving a star rating only takes a few seconds, and a review only takes a minute or two. So it's worth doing if you want to share the love and expand your online community. The other thing I wanted to mention is that I've been thinking about doing a Google Hangout, a kind of virtual knit session. I've been thinking about doing this for a while, because I know there are certainly quite a few in the US virtual knit nights, and that's great for people in the US. For people in Europe, not so good, because it'd be kind of in the middle of the night. Not great to trying to set your alarm to like 3 a.m. in order to do a virtual knit night. It'd be too much yawning. So I kind of looked for European ones or UK ones, and I've not really come across any others. I know that FO and Dye were talking about doing it, but there's been no date set for that. So I thought maybe about giving it a go myself. Somebody's already volunteered to do a test run with me. So once I give that a go, I will sort of confirm dates and things. But it'd be really good if you are interested, if you went over to Google Plus, because that's how you do the virtual knit night. It's run through Google Hangouts. If you go over to Google Plus, and if you find me on there and send me a message saying you're interested in joining in, and let me know sort of days and times that work or don't work, I will try and sort something out to get the most amount of people involved. It's probably going to be during the day, because that's when I'm at home with time to spare and not having to look over my shoulder and worry that my partner is being bothered by my cackling in the corner. So yeah, it's probably going to be during the day, possibly there's a possibility of doing maybe an evening or two here and there. But just let me know if you're interested. I'll put the link in the show notes to my Google Plus page, and if you send me a message over there, then I can add you to my kind of hangout circle, and then I can invite you to join the hangout when it's time and I've got it all set up. So let me know if you're interested in doing that. I think it could be quite fun. It'd be nice to have you talk back to me rather than me just talking at the camera and the mic. So it's been lovely chatting to you as always. Please get in touch, come and join the Ravelry group. There are links in the show notes to find that, and the show notes once again are at www.stitchtogether.co.uk, and by selecting the podcast button. It'd be lovely to hear from you over on the Ravelry group, over on the website, whether it's on Google Plus, whether it's on Instagram, whether it's on Twitter. It would be lovely to engage you all in conversation in some form or other. I mean, that's why I started this out in the first place, isn't it? So thanks for joining me and spending your time with me. I hope your crafting goes as planned, and if it doesn't go as planned, you have access to alcohol. And if not alcohol, chocolate. Unless you're very strange and fruit is your comfort food. See you again soon. Bye.